Doing an experiment here. I've got a second camera going so that we are live on YouTube as well. Be very curious to see if that works and if anyone finds the YouTube broadcast. But the normal thing is Facebook, and where are you tuning in from? What cities, what countries, what continents are in the house? We are going to be looking at Berachos, page 53, and we're going to be finishing up chapter 8 of Berachos. That's volume 1 of the Talmud. And we've got a couple of amazing little moments and a spectacular teaching regarding Amen. Amen. The importance of saying Amen is a lot, quite a bit. We're going to get to that in a moment. Owen Meyer in the house from New York. Yes, there you are. Larry from Queens. Who else is with us? Let me know. We'd love to know who's in the house where you're tuning in from, particularly because when you comment, it signals to Facebook and now YouTube that something is happening, something of value, and more people will be shown this video. All right, we have been looking here in chapter 8 at various protocols having to do with a meal, particularly when there is disagreement between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, between the followers, the students of Hillel and the students, the followers of Shammai, sort of for several generations after Hillel and Shammai. There were these disagreements among their students. These matters really pertain to Tuma and Tahara, to matters of ritual purity and impurity. But they became established customs, and there's just different ways among these followers to handle these things. Not only at meals, but also at the conclusion of Shabbat. So we've also been talking about Havdalah. If you saw our Saturday night show, we had a beautiful singing Havdalah with Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein, who stopped in. And you saw some of the customs of Havdalah. Generally speaking, Havdalah is the ceremony that we make when we say goodbye to Shabbat. Shabbat has ended, and we welcome the days of the working week. And so we want to mark that transition from the holy time of Shabbat to the mundane time of the work week. Now, normally, as you saw in our show, we would light a Havdalah candle after Shabbat ends. Is this... I just want to make sure this isn't a problem here. Sorry. Oh, is this what's going on? Okay, I'm not sure. Hopefully that recording's fine. Sorry. Okay. So normally we would light a Havdalah candle after Shabbat ends, right? So during Shabbat, we cannot kindle a fire. We don't make a new fire. We don't light a light like I just did. This candle, a few people have asked, by the way, I always light a candle at the beginning of AT Daily. That is not any kind of religious obligation. It's purely symbolic. That's why I don't make a blessing when I do it, because I'm not required to light that candle. And it is just to symbolize that we're lighting up the darkness here in social media. But anyway, after Shabbat ends, we would normally light that Havdalah candle. If necessary, if we didn't have a Havdalah candle, and we need at least 2 wicks to make it a Havdalah candle. Let's say we didn't have one, but we had an oil lamp that was lit all during Shabbat. Could we make the Havdalah ceremony and make the blessing over the lights of the fire, over that lamp that was burning all through Shabbat? The answer is yes, we can do that. It is not preferable. We would rather light a new Havdalah candle at the end of Shabbat. But if we don't have that option and there was a light that burned all through Shabbat, that would be all right. What if it was a candle that we lit during Shabbat? Could we make a blessing over that candle for Havdalah after Shabbat? Our first our impulse, our instinct is to say, no, of course not, because a light that we kindle during Shabbat was not a permitted light, right? We actually committed an avera, a sin, by lighting a new light during Shabbat when it was prohibited. But the exception to that rule is for matters of life and death and for health, right? We can violate Shabbat. So if a woman is giving birth, we need light to help her give birth. We can light that candle. In fact, it's obligated, right? It's not only not a sin, but now we must create that light in order to, preserve that woman and the baby that she's giving birth to for their benefit. It was all right to light that candle during Shabbat, and it would be all right to make a Havdalah blessing after Shabbat over that light that we created during Shabbat and what is normally prohibited, but under those circumstances would be permissible. Okay. If Havdalah is being made in the study hall, right? So we're not just doing it at home with our family, but let us say that there's a study hall where there's a bunch of Torah students learning, and you can learn during Shabbat. You just can't take notes, but you can certainly be doing Torah study during Shabbat. And then Shabbat ended, right? Let's say that, for example, they made their mincha, their afternoon service, early in the afternoon. So then they were just studying all the way through the afternoon. And then Shabbat ended. It got dark on them. And they said, okay, it's time to make Havdalah. It's time to mark the transition out of Shabbat and into the week. So one person at the front of the room would light the Havdalah candle and have the wine and the spice and make the blessing for everybody. Now, when he lights that candle, right, only one person's going to taste that wine. Only one person perhaps is only going to smell the spice, although it could be passed around. But everyone is going to see the light of the candle at the front of the room. So the question is, does everybody make their own blessing over the light? Or is it enough that the guy at the front of the room makes the blessing over the light and everyone else answers Amen? Beis Shammai said, everyone makes their own blessing. Beis Hillel say, one guy can make a blessing at the front of the room, everyone else can answer Amen. Why did Beis Shammai want everybody to make their own blessing? Because they're all studying Torah in that big study hall, and if everybody has to stop and wait for the whole room to be ready, so then there's too much cessation from the Torah study that could otherwise be going on. Why does Beis Hillel like that everyone just looks at the guy up front? Because the Amen is a perfectly permissible way for everyone to fulfill their obligation. It's not such a big interruption in the Torah study. And some people hold like Rabbi Yosef, who said that the one who answers Amen when somebody else recites a blessing is even greater than the one who recites the blessing. That sounds crazy. I mean, we get that we should say Amen when somebody else recites a blessing, but how could the one saying Amen get an even greater reward, have an even greater merit than the one who said the blessing in the first place? Not everyone agrees with Rabbi Yossi, but many do. And the ones who do say that the explanation is like what Rabbi Nehorai said, because Rabbi Nehorai said, what can this be likened to? It's like a battle, right? And there's like the vanguard of soldiers who, rush in, and they're like the infantry, the privates, right? And they go in and start the battle. And then the heavy artillery comes up behind them, or like the knights in shining armor, or the generals, like the greater ones, the more prominent soldiers arrive to the battlefield after, but it is they who ultimately win the battle. And so the one who answers Amen, it's like he's finishing the effort, right? The one who makes the blessing, he initiates the fight, let's say, in this case, like the campaign, right? The campaign for the praise and honor of the Holy One. And the one who says Amen completes the action, right? And he gets a great merit because without an Amen, it's like, it was nice, a blessing was made, but without somebody to answer Amen, it's like the whole thing has not been completed. The campaign, as it were, has not been completed. Much better that there should be both a blessing and an amen, and then the person saying amen is the one who completes that unit of blessing plus amen. So when you get a chance to say amen to somebody who has made a blessing, seize the opportunity. It is a great, great thing to say amen, provided that you heard the entire blessing and you know what it is that you're saying amen to. We don't want to jump in and say amen when we're not sure what has been blessed or who the person was making the blessing. In case they were blessing the wrong thing, or they made a mistake, or God forbid, they should be reciting a blessing that could be for idolatry, we don't want to say amen to that. But assuming that you know who it was and that it was a proper and appropriate blessing and you're saying amen to that, all good. Okay. The spice of Havdalah. Okay. The light and the spice that we use at Havdalah. We just said that it's preferable to light a candle at Havdalah and to recite the blessing over light over that candle that is newly lit. But it may be possible that you don't have that candle and you'd like to say the blessing over the light, and there was a light that was already lit and you could use it, right? One, maybe it burned all through Shabbat to give light to the people so that they weren't sitting in darkness, or maybe it was lit for some other reason. Now, if there was a light that was lit to honor the dead, that is a beautiful thing to light to honor the dead, but such a light, its purpose was not to give illumination. And when we make a blessing at Havdalah, praising God for creating the lights of the fire, what we're praising God for is for creating light that gives us illumination so that we're not all sitting in the dark all the time. So a light that was lit for a purpose other than giving illumination, right? Like if it was just some kind of decorative light, but it doesn't actually light up so that people, can see by it. So then we don't make a blessing over such a light. Likewise, when we make a blessing at Havdalah over the spice, we often use cloves, but it's any beautiful smelling, fragrant herb that we could use to make the Havdalah blessing. But if such an incense or a fragrant herb was actually being used to cover, a disgusting odor, a fetid odor, a bathroom odor, the odor of a corpse, something like that, so then it's not really being used for its fragrance. Perfume can be blessed with the spice blessing of Havdalah because its purpose is to provide, a pleasing fragrance. But like air deodorant, that you're using just to cover bathroom smells, no, you can't use that because its purpose was not to provide a pleasant fragrance. It's to cover an odor, and that's not the same thing. Yeah. Now, you will see when people do Havdalah that the people around the room are looking at their nails, right? And kind of putting their nails up between themselves and the flame. And I was always well aware that we're looking at our nails when there's somebody, in the center of the room, they're holding up the candle, and we look at our nails in the light of the candle. And I kind of always did that, but it wasn't clear to me what I was doing. Was I looking for the reflection of the light on the back of my nails, or was I checking to see if my nails are dirty? What exactly was I doing? And in our daf today, it was finally clarified for me what it is that we are doing. We're blessing light for giving us, we're blessing God for giving us a light that illuminates the darkness, right? A light that literally lights up the darkness so that we can see by it. How do we know if there's enough light for us to be able to recite that blessing? The first answer is so that you could tell the difference between two coins, right? You could tell two coins that are different. You could tell them apart, which coin is which. If you don't have a coin, so now you look at your fingernail, and in the dark, you can't tell, right, where your finger ends and your fingernail begins. But when you have just enough light to make out the fact that you have fingernails, right? That you can distinguish the fingernail from the finger that the nail is resting on, then you have enough light to make a blessing to God for creating the lights of the fire, the lights that illuminate. That's why we're looking at our nails. And symbolic, I mean, we could have used some other body part to do that. Why the nails? So there's a nice teaching that the fingernails, which never stop growing, right? Your hair may fall out, our height certainly stops changing once we leave, the teenage years. But the fingernails always keep growing. I think even after you die, they grow a little. And so they represent abundance, right? Abundant blessing. Fingernails represent the abundant blessing. Now, some say that there's a negative aspect of fingernails, and it's sort of like, things come into us and provide all the energy we need and all the goodness that goes through us, and a little bit of negativity ends up in the fingernails. And that's why when we clip our fingernails, we're actually very careful to dispose of them properly. Later in the Talmud, I remember we'll encounter a teaching that fingernail clippings left on the floor are actually dangerous, and particularly to a pregnant woman. If a pregnant woman walks over fingernail clippings, it can harm her. And so we're especially careful when we trim our nails that we keep track of where the fingernail clippings go and dispose of them properly. And if for no other reason, for that teaching, I mean, it's disgusting to leave fingernail clippings where other people are going to see them, step on them, encounter them, in some way. We must be particular to dispose of our fingernail clippings. Okay. Okay. So when we do this practice at Havdalah, right, that we make a blessing over the light, and we use the light to look at our fingernails so that we see that we have enough light to distinguish between the nail and the finger. This is a little tricky, right? When the Havdalah is being done in a place where there's other light, like, there were lights that were like electric lights that were just on all the time, and that's what's really allowing you to see the fingernails. So ideally, you do Havdalah in the dark so that you know that the light that you're blessing is the one that's allowing you to distinguish your fingernails from the finger. The question is, do we say the blessing over the light and then look at the nails on our fingers, or look at the nails on our fingers and then say the blessing over the light? Philosophically, what is the difference? If we look at our nails first and then make the blessing, so then we received a benefit, right? And then we said the blessing afterward. Now that is unlike the way we eat food, right? When we're going to eat a piece of food, first we say a blessing and then we eat the food. So if our reason for saying the blessing is because we're getting benefit from that light, we should say the blessing first. So like you're in a singing Havdalah, like you sing the blessing, which I'll say in Hebrew because I'm teaching it, even though I'm not blessing any particular light. But if you hear them say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei meorei ha'esh, that's the blessing over the lights of the fire. And then you look at your fingernails in the light because you're saying a blessing for the benefit. However, your approach to your reasoning for saying that blessing at Havdalah may not be because you're getting benefit from that light, but rather because you're praising God for creating light, right? Creating light generally, creating light at the beginning, creating light in an ongoing way, right? It's a general blessing to God for the fact that God made light. So then you could actually look at your fingernails first, right? Like appreciate, oh, that's light. I'm getting light. Light is amazing. And then say the blessing afterward, right? So that approach is because of praise, you can experience the light and then make a blessing for it. If it's just merely thanking God for the benefit that you're getting right now, so then you would bless first and then enjoy that benefit. And those two approaches are both valid. You might want to think it through or ask your rabbi, which he holds by if you want to follow your rabbi. And some people, to cover their bases, so they look at their fingernails before that blessing is recited, and they keep looking at it while the blessing is recited, and they recite it or say Amen, and then look at it after so that they've done both approaches and are covered. Okay. Now, if you're in a big room, right, and especially if there's some ambient light around, and like you're just not seeing your fingernails by the light of that candle that's all the way across the big room. So if your approach is that you want to thank God for the benefit that you're personally getting, so now you're not personally getting because that light is all the way across the room. But you can still bless under that theory because someone at the front of the room is getting the benefit, right? And you're saying Amen to his blessing. And it's even enough to say that you could have come close. The light is there. You could draw benefit from it. And even though you're far away, it's enough that you could have come close. That works. What if you don't have a candle, you can't get a candle, there's not some light that was burning all through Shabbat, there's just no candle available, no light available, and perhaps no spice available. Perhaps all there is a cup of wine that you save to make Havdalah with. Can you recite the light and spice blessings in the absence of light and spice? Answer, yes. And this is why we tend to think that it's not just for the benefit that we're getting at that ceremony of having light on our fingers or smelling the cloves or whatever the spice is when it gets passed to us. The fact is, we can say those blessings even if there is no light or spice available to us, because those blessings are inherent to the Havdalah ceremony. And Shabbat has ended, and we are entering the work week, and we do mark that transition with a Havdalah ceremony. And so we can say the light and spice blessings, even if there are no light and spice present. And that is per the opinion of Rav Yehuda, who said that Rav Yehuda said that Rav said that we can make the light and spice blessings at Havdalah, even in the absence of light and spice. Having said that, should we do it if there's any way we can get our hands on light and spice, without some crazy, inappropriate effort? Yes, it is not preferable to make those blessings over light and spice at Havdalah in the absence of light and spice. We only do that if we're forced into that situation. Much better to have the light and spice. So do your best to get it if you're in that situation. And finally, to close out chapter 8, we return to a teaching that we had before, that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel disagree on what happens when a person ate a meal, right, a meal that had bread in it, and then forgot to say the grace after the meal. He simply forgot. And then a little later, when he was somewhere else, remembered, I ate, I forgot to recite the grace after the meals. What do I do? Beis Shammai say that person has to return to the place where he or she was eating and say the grace after meals in that spot. Beis Hillel say, you could just say it wherever you are. You don't have to return to that spot. It's enough that you remembered and now you recite the blessing. That's their disagreement. But what they agree on is how long do you have, you can't just wait till the next day, right? So as long as you remember within the amount of time that it takes to digest the meal after which you forgot to recite the grace after meals, if you're still digesting that meal, you can still recite the grace after the meal. How do we measure? That's what's in today's page. When that meal ends, when the digestion of that meal ends, when you become hungry again. So, one of the opinions is when you become hungry again. Another opinion is the time it takes to walk 4 mil. which is sort of like, I'm not sure exactly, but I think it's like 5 miles, like the time it would take to walk 5 miles. So it's quite a bit of time, right? A few hours. But the general concept is, as long as you're still digesting that meal, if you then remember, you can still say the grace after meal. Per the opinion of Beis Shammai, you have to return to where you're reading. Per the opinion of Beis Hillel, it's enough to say it where you are. Today, we also add the wrinkle. Both of these cases and their disagreement are based on the idea that you forgot to recite the grace after the meal. What if you intentionally omitted the grace after meals? In other words, it occurred to you, I should recite the grace after the meal. I'm in a hurry. I don't feel like it. I'm just not going to do it. I'm gonna let it go, right? So that's a poor choice, right? We shouldn't make that choice. It's a sinful choice, but it happens. So if you purposely didn't recite the grace after the meal, and then you regretted that you didn't recite the grace after the meal, and you want to make up for that omission, now both Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai agree that you need to return to the spot where you ate in order to recite that grace and to recite it properly. But regarding one who forgot, so that this argument continues, and by the way, we follow Beis Hillel, right? So you don't have to return, though some do. They take on that stringency and hold like Beis Shammai. But what about the case where Beis Hillel challenges Beis Shammai and says, well, let's say that you had a meal on the Temple Mount, right? And then, you descended. So in other words, like you came down a mountain, right? Like it was not just a long walk, but a long downhill walk. And now if you needed to return, now this is for the forgotten one. If you omit it on purpose, you have to return up there by all opinions. But if you simply forgot to say it, and then you remembered when you were at the bottom of the mountain, do you really have to climb all the way to the top of the mountain? Beis Hillel say to Beis Shammai, and Beis Shammai answer, yeah, why not? If you forgot a purse of gold at the top of the mountain, would you not walk all the way back up to the top of the mountain? Likewise, the merit of saying a grace after a meal to fulfill that obligation is so great that a person should be willing to go to the top of the mountain to make up for that forgotten blessing. And then we have a lovely story that we hear. And I want to get it right. Who was it? It was Rabbah bar Chana. So Rabbah bar Chana, a sage, was traveling with a caravan. They stopped, they ate, and then the caravan, everyone said, okay, everybody back on your camels, let's go. So you can imagine that it's no small thing. It's not like 3 guys traveling with with one or two, or even 3 donkeys. They ate, they get up, now they head out. It's a caravan, so there's a lot of strangers traveling together, businessmen, travelers, all these people have kind of grouped together to form the caravan, and then they moved on. And now they've walked, let's say, for, 15, 20 minutes from the place that they left, and then Rabbah bar Chana remembers that, oh, I didn't make my grace after meal at the place where we ate. Now, he does not hold like Beis Hillel. According to Beis Hillel, now he remembered, he just recites the grace where he is, he's good, he can go on. But if he personally held like Beis Shammai, now he feels that he has to go back to that spot. But how is he going to get the caravan to wait for him? He knows, he says to himself, if I tell them that I'd like to go back and recite my grace after the meal, they're going to tell me, God is everywhere. Just recite your grace here. Perhaps this was before, or people weren't aware of this, this dispute between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, and or the people in the caravan weren't even Jewish, or they just didn't care. But they would say to him, "What are you talking about? God is everywhere. Thank God, right where you are. You don't have to go back there." Right? But he reasons with himself. But if I tell them that I left, something very valuable at that spot, then they'll understand that I need to go back, and they'll wait for me. Right? They'll just wait here while I go there and come back. So he told them that he left a golden dove at the place where they ate. Right? Now this is a lie. He lied. Right? He told a lie. His motivation was good. His motivation was very pure. He wanted to go back to the spot that he ate and do the correct, obey the law as he understood it, right, per the opinion of Beis Shammai, that he must go back to the place where he ate in order to recite the grace after meals. Knowing that the people would pressure him so much not to go, he told this little lie that I left a golden dove at that spot. They said, okay, well, if you lost a gold dove, who knows what kind of fortune that's worth? Go get it. So he went back to that spot, and what happened? He found a gold dove. I guess he shouldn't have told a lie, but because his intention was so, pure and holy and just for the honor of God, God didn't want him to be a liar. And so God arranged for that gold dove to be at that spot, and he found it. We can't, behave like that. We should not tell lies, even for holy purposes. But I guess Rabba Bar Bar Chana got lucky in that situation. And likewise, we had a couple other stories where there were two students who were eating together, and one forgot to recite the grace after the meals. The other one remembered but didn't say anything, chose not to say anything. And then they walked on, and the one who forgot, right, who didn't need to go back, he could have recited the blessing where he was, but I want to get this right. There were two students who ate and did not recite a blessing. One of them did so unwittingly, and in accordance with the opinion of Beis Shammai, he returned to where he ate, and he found a purse of gold, right? So there, he did everything right. He forgot. He just forgot. He's human. But he wanted to be extra stringent, and he went by the opinion of Beis Shammai. He returned to the place where he ate, and he found a purse of gold that was, who knows how it got there. But it was an abandoned purse of gold, not one that needed to be returned. We'll get into those laws in a few years. How do you know if something is lost and you can keep it, or lost and you must find its owner? Presumably in this case, it's just gold that is not identifiable. There are no identifying marks on it, and lost in such a way that its owner would have despaired of ever getting it back. Only in that situation can a lost item be kept. The other student, the other one forgot to, omitted to say the grace after the meal intentionally. And in accordance with the opinion of Beis Hillel, right, who agrees with Beis Shammai that if you intentionally omitted to say the grace after the meal, you must return to that place. That student did not. He did not return, and a lion ate him. There it is. There you have it. A lion ate the guy who didn't return and do the right thing. Let us be clear, these obligations to recite the grace after the meal, that's an obligation that's incumbent on a Jew. A non-Jew is not obliged to recite the grace after the meal or to say a blessing before eating, though those are good practices to do. You certainly always want to be thankful to God for what you're about to eat or what you have eaten. But a non-Jew is permitted to say thank you in those ways and to answer amen. I'm sure he can answer amen, but the Jew is obligated to say the blessing before eating and the blessing after, and if he had a full meal, to say the grace after the meal. That concludes chapter 8 of the first tractate of the Talmud, Berachos, and we will continue tomorrow with God's help with an open chapter 9, which is the final chapter of tractate Berachos. How many pages are there in Berachos? About 60 some odd. So we're pretty close. This was page 53, tomorrow's page 54, and it looks like there's 63 pages in the first tractate. So Pretty cool, right? We're only 9 pages away from completing our first volume of the Talmud together here on AT Daily, tracking the Daf Yomi cycle of Talmud study. When we open chapter 9 tomorrow, as I say, with God's help, we'll be looking at some more particular blessings for particular situations, right? The kind of blessing that you would say when you see a rainbow, or when you see a very beautiful person, or when you see, there's this particular blessing when you see 600 and some odd thousand Jews in one place. That has a blessing. We're going to be learning a bunch of particular blessings for particular situations. All right, let me just see if there were any questions that I should check out. Joyce says, I thought Havdalah is a way to enjoy the last moment of Shabbat and prepare for a week of working hard. I mean, it does have that value, but you can't make Havdalah until Shabbat is ended, since you're lighting that candle. It's dark, right? So you're kind of stretching the joy of Shabbat beyond Shabbat. So in that sense, you're absolutely right. And thank you for reminding me. We just said that it is permitted to recite the blessing over light and spice at Havdalah, even if you don't have light and spice present. It is not preferable. We want to avoid that situation if at all possible, but we may still recite those blessings as part of the Havdalah ceremony, even if we don't have light and spice to do it with. Along with that teaching, we learn why is the spice so important, right? Between the lights of the fire and the spice and the wine, we sort of are covering the whole world of blessings. Light represents just everything that God is giving to us, which is around us constantly. The spice is like a particular gift for the humans that nourishes the soul, right? A fragrant herbage. Animals can enjoy it too, but it was unnecessary for there to be fragrances. It's just unnecessary. We don't need beautiful fragrances in order to survive, but God gives them to us, right? And wine represents, everything that sustains us. It's sort of the height of what sustains us, stands in for the joy of wine and bread and food and everything. We understand the light and the wine maybe even better than the spice. The spice is this extra gift. But there's an additional teaching that it is beautiful to have spice at your Havdalah. Why? Because when Shabbat ends, our Shabbat soul departs from us. Right? During Shabbat, everyone has a soul at all times. In fact, you don't have a soul. You are a soul. You're walking around in a body. During Shabbat, an extra soul descends from the world of souls and joins your weekday soul. Right? You have an extra soul on Shabbat. And that's why Shabbat is so special, and it's so beautiful to enjoy Shabbat, and you're able to access spiritual, the nooks. You're able to access a higher level of spirituality during Shabbat than you can during the rest of the week. When Shabbat ends, that Shabbat soul departs, goes back to the world of souls. The spice, which nourishes our soul more than our body, comforts us on the departure of the Shabbat soul. So it's a beautiful teaching and a beautiful reason to make sure that you have spice at Havdalah. All right, my holy brothers and sisters, it is great to be with you. I'm sending you big love from LA. And God willing, we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. How do you end this?